start decks for Overdress were released back in May of 2021 and were followed by set 1 merely a week later. Since then, we have received quite a few more sets, and with the Overdress anime having aired its final episode and the DivineZ era looming over the horizon, we thought it would be appropriate to look back at all the units we have received. Doing every nation in one video would make for quite a lengthy video, so we're going to break it up into the 6 main nations and then do all the extras in one last video. In today's entry, we are going to discuss the nation of Lyrical Monasterio, the nation of idols that travels across Cray on a giant flying pink whale. We are going to divide this list into units that have a second form and those that do not. We will begin this list with the start deck for Lyrical Monasterio. This is where we were first introduced to Kairi, a unit that is very reminiscent to the original Bermuda Triangle, with her ability to return units to hand and then call them to add extra attacks. Her original form was a bit lackluster as her multi-attack was tied to Persona Ride. However, that didn't mean she didn't have at least some extra attack capabilities. In the first Lyrical set, she received a unit that allowed her to call a unit from hand to open rearguard, so you could still perform at least 4 attacks. Then we got her updated form. Just like all the original start decks, Kairi received a grade 4 form. The grade 4 Kairi gave any rearguards placed this turn an extra 5k, and just like the grade 3 Kairi, she would return units to hand to then call them again. Giving the deck 5 attacks were pretty much free. She also received a grade skipper just like the other grade 4 start deck forms, so some cards you might see in her deck are things like Penelope, who can restand her entire column when your Kairi returns units to hand, and Asmi, who can return herself when your Kairi attacks to then call a copy of herself from hand. Quite a strong deck that honestly seems pretty fun. But next up we have maybe something a bit more unique with Celestial, the angel with the white and black wings. Her original form had an effect depending on the grade of the cards in your bind zone. If you had only odd grades, you would have white wings, and if you had only even grades, you would have black wings. This form gave herself a crit and plus 5k if you were in white wings, or she would give all of your opponent's units minus 5k if you were on black wings. But now let's talk about her newest form. This card is also regarded as the original Celestial. It also had 2 separate effects depending on the wings, similar to the original Celestial. If you were on black wings, you could discard a card from hand to search your deck for a unit with black wings and call it to rearguard. If you were on white wings, at the end of battle she attacked, you could counterblast 1, discard a card to search your deck or hand for an Celestial and ride it. On Vanguard Circle, it would then lose a drive. There are so many white or black wing units, so we'll just discuss some of the popular ones. Things like Elkel that lets you activate both wings regardless of the grades in your bind. Torquil is just big power, put herself into soul. Fanael can lower your opponent's vanguard's power for the whole turn. Payal gives you some extra attacks from the back row. MIL is some nice recursion, but from there we move on to Clarissa. If you've ever played Brawlers in Premium or played Vermilion, then this girl is going to sound very similar. She can search you aim to be the strongest idol from deck, but only when she's placed on top of the grade 2 from the ride line. Her second ability lets you draw a card and give an Earns Correct plus 5k whenever she hits. Earns Correct is the name of her and her supporting units, so that's why that effect has that keyword in it. You might think this ability is a bit underwhelming, but for that we have to look at the order card. The order requires you have 5 different named Earns Correct units on board to play, which at the time we only had 5, so it was a little rough, but you could get it to happen. It would then give all Earns Correct units plus 5k, which although cool would again be pretty lackluster. It's just a plus 5k to the board. However, if your opponent would be at grade 3 or greater, it grants your Clarissa a new ability. This ability allows Clarissa to select 3 circles and attack the units on those circles. So now her ability to draw and give power can activate a total of 3 times. And some of the Earns Correct units even had abilities that relied on your Vanguard hitting, which became easier when Clarissa could attack 3 units at once. Both Catalin and Trilby had this kind of effect. Catalin would be able to restand if your Vanguard hit, and Trilby gained plus 5k for every hit. Clarissa also received a new form similarly to Celestial. The new Clarissa allows you to search for the order card by discarding a card with Clarissa in its card name, or if you Persona with that turn, you can just Soul Blast 1 instead. However, they changed her on-hit ability. Although now you can draw 2 cards and give all of your rearguards with Earns Correct plus 5k, it's only at once per turn, meaning that her whole shtick of hitting multiple things kind of loses some impacts. Of course, you pretty much guarantee a hit by attacking 3 units. It does feel a little bit weird to make it a once per turn. This new former Clarissa came with more Earns Correct units, so it did facilitate the ability to have 5 different names on board. But next up, we have the vampire girl, Felty Rosa, who brings with her the ghost of her past relationships. Felty Rosa allows you to call any ghost normal units revealed during her drive checks to an open front row rear. If you call a card, she gains a drive. So the best way this would work out is drive check a ghost, call it, drive check a second ghost, call it, and then she would still have twin drive. Obviously, the deck was kind of luck-based, but we had some ghost units that helped facilitate the multi-attack with having to hit 2 ghosts off the drive check. Felty Rosa then received an upgraded form. The new Felty Rosa gave Ghost in the front row plus 10k as long as you have a grade 3 card with Felty Rosa in its soul. That sounds good, right? You get extra power and it's pretty easy to get it done with some of the older Felty Rosa support. Now her superior Ghost Call is tied behind a CB. She will gain the ability once per turn when your drive trick reveals a Ghost normal unit or a grade 3 card with Felty Rosa. You can call it to an open rearguard, then if you call the card, she gains the drive twice. It is a bit strange that she gains the ability twice instead of just not making it once per turn, but I guess they didn't want you to flood the board with Ghost. With almost every set bringing us at least 1 or 2 Ghosts, she constantly receives new pseudo support, so she can only get better. But following the Vampire Girl, we have the Cat Girl, Lauren. She uses song cards to gain power and guard restriction. The first form of Lauren could CB1 to sing a song card. You do this by selecting a face-up song in your order zone and turning it face down. This would then activate its song abilities, which there are 4 different song cards. One of them would give you a crit, one of them would give your front row plus 5, and another one lets you draw a card and give your Vanguard plus 5k, and then the final one allows you to restand a rearguard for each face-down song card, then gives your Vanguard plus 10k for each unit restood. Lauren then had a second ability that stated that when she attacked, if you had 2 or more face-down cards in your order zone, you could choose a face-up song card and sing it. Then she would gain a guard restriction. The restriction was that your opponent could not call Sentinels to Guardian Circle for her attack. Unfortunately, this was tied to your second grade 3 turn since you were only able to sing 1 song a turn. This issue was sort of solved with her second form. The new Lauren could call a unit from top 5 when she was placed on Vanguard, then when she attacked you could choose a face-up song card and sing it. If your opponent's Vanguard was grade 3 or greater, you could Soul Blast a grade 3 card with Lauren's card name to give herself an extra drive, and she would also gain her original guard restriction. The deck really needs another unit that could also sing song cards because 1 song a turn limits the deck quite a bit. Following her, we have the Lyrical Monasterio Rock Girl, Willista. In her original form, you could Soul Blast one of 2 different gem cards to gain a different effect. If you Soul Blasted Ruby, Willista gained plus 15k and your opponent couldn't intercept. If you Soul Blasted Sapphire, you would look at top 5, call 2 units to open rearguard, and then discard the rest. The called units would then gain plus 5k. The orders had their own effects. Sapphire gave a unit plus 5k, then would put itself into Soul. Ruby would cost a CB, but would let you draw 2, then discard a card. Similarly to Sapphire, it would move into Soul. Willista even had a multi-attacker. They opened the deck to a 4th attack. Then Willista received its newest form. The new Willista came alongside a new gem card, Crossing Illumirays. This new gem would count as both the original gems at once, meaning you could cut the original gems out entirely. The new gem would put itself into Soul, draw a card, and give your band plus 5. Then, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, Willista gains the ability to Counterblast 1, Soul Blast a grade 3 or greater card with Willista in its card name to restand one of your rearguards. This would bring the deck up to a total of 5 attacks. But now let's talk about the new Willista herself. When placed on Vanguard, you could discard a card to get a gem card from either Soul or Drop. Then her second ability was very reminiscent of the original. You could Soul Blast a gem card and perform the following effects based on the gem Soul Blasted. Ruby would give Willista plus 15k, and Sapphire would let you check top 5 to call 2 units to rearguard circle. However, with the new order, we could just get both effects at the same time. Willista has completed at the regional level, not just in Overdress, but in Premium. Although it has received restrictions in both, the Premium hit won't take effect until sometime in February. Then we move on to the last 2 units with a second form, Erminia and her powerful abilities, and Fortia and all her friends. Let's start with Fortia, who uses the friend mechanic that is similar to Harmony from Premium. This is a state a card enters when another unit with a friend ability is placed in its column. The state ends if one of the friends is removed. The original Fortia could restand for a CB and a discard if you had 5 or more other friends on board. She would lose a drive, but that's common for almost every restand we've seen. There are so many friend units that it's hard to give you some of the better ones, but you will most likely be playing the ones that released alongside her new form. The newest Fortia only asks for 3 other friends to gain a drive. Her restand now asks you for the 5 other friends, and that you discard a card with Fortia to restand her, but now she loses 2 drives. If you Persona Row, then you can Counterblast 1 and discard any card to pay for the restand instead. I don't really know how to properly gauge Fortia as she's not anything crazy. Her 2 support units do help a bit. Belian gives your front row power and she becomes a 20k herself, and then Ambo can give a guard restriction. We will have to see how this unit plays out, as the day I'm recording this is the sneak peek week for the new set, and we will be receiving these new cards. Then moving on to the final 2 form deck, Erminia introduces us to the powerful mechanic, which are abilities that ask you to have no soul. Erminia can Counterblast 1 to give herself plus 5k. She can do this any number of times as long as you have CP. That is because her powerful ability requires you have no soul and no face-up cards in your damage zone. Then at the end of the battle she attacked, you could discard a card from hand to choose a rearguard with a powerful ability and restand it. She would then also reduce the next counterblast you paid that turn by 1. Then let's move on to her latest form from the newest set. This new Erminia has 2 abilities. The first states that during the battle phase, if you have 3 or more face down cards in your damage zone, your front row powerful abilities cost counterblast 1 less. Her second ability is a powerful one. If you have no cards in Soul, you can discard a card with your minion's card name from your hand to send all of your front row rearguards with powerful abilities. If you Persona Road, you can pay for this ability with Counterblast 1, which would turn free if your first ability is activated. The units releasing alongside Armenia are Custodia, who can help you get some units on board or help you dig for the Persona rights, Libera, who can return all the rearguards in her column if you have 5 or more powerful units on board. They also both share a powerful ability that gives them an extra plus 5k shield. With that, we conclude the 2-form section and we move on to the single form section, starting with the new encounter decks, Prism and Pacifica. Since they haven't officially released, it's hard to give them a fair assessment, but we can at least discuss their abilities. Labrador is the new boss for Overdress's Prism deck. She allows you to Soul Blast 1 and return one of your units to hand to give herself plus 5k. This is so her second ability is a little easier to do. She allows you to call units with Prism in their card names to open rearguards. If you called a card, you draw a card, then if your opponent's at grade 3 or greater, you give your front row plus 5k and she gains a crit. This sounds great, but we run into a bit of an issue here. There are a total of 3 Prism units, with one of them being Labrador herself, so hard to find the 2 Prism units you will be calling, as she can only call Prism units. But let's discuss the 2 Prism units. We start with Celtic, who can return herself and another Prism unit to hand for a Soul Blast. Then we have Leyte, who can Soul Charge 1 if she's returned to hand, and she can also Countercharge 1 if you have not Countercharged that turn. But moving on from Prism, we have Pacifica, who does have 2 forms, but one is strictly rearguard, so she got put into this part of the list. Pacifica can Counterblast 1 and put a card from hand on the bottom of the deck to draw 2 cards. Then when she attacks, you can Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast a card with Pacifica to search your deck for up to 1 unit and call it to an open rearguard. So she's got at least 4 attacks. However, we have to look at the other Pacifica. The rearguard Pacifica can attack from the back row center if your Vanguard is Pacifica. She will put herself into Soul at the end of battle to give one of your units plus 5k, and if she's put from the back row center, you get to draw a card. So that means the deck has a total of 5 attacks. The main issue is that it relies on that rearguard Pacifica a lot, and you may run out of them if you aren't careful. Let's keep moving because we have quite a few units left. We will save the 3 units from the latest lyrical set for the end. Starting with Hazret, the bunny girl, she can Counterblast 1 to give 5 normal unit rearguards plus 2k and an ability. The ability says that at the end of battle with attack the Vanguard, you can draw a card and put it on the bottom of the deck. If you choose 3 or more, she gains plus 10k. They did, however, make all of her support units weaker than normal units. So you'll see 8k grade 2s, 6k grade 1s, and that is because of one specific card, Clan Feli. She allows you to put a grade 2 less card from hand into Soul to check top 7 and then call either a grade 3 12k or lower, a grade 2 9k or lower, or a grade 1 7k or lower unit. If you don't call a card, you get to draw a card. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't think Hazard is that good. She does have a multi-attacker in Shaylin, who can move a unit from the back row center to an open front row, but that only gives you 4 attacks. And with Hazard's power boost, just putting units back to their original power, the deck does feel a bit weak. She does need some support, and although the newest lyrical set, I believe, did have something for her, I think the deck still needs a ways to go. Nonetheless, we will move forward to Kyoka and her magazine. Kyoka can Soul Blast 1 to declare a grade between 1 and 3, and check top 5 for a unit with that grade or a magazine card. If it's a unit, you get to call it to rearguard, and if it's a magazine, it goes to your hand. She then gives your front row plus 5k if you've played a magazine order. But let's talk about the magazine cards. Lyrical Shooting Star is the only one currently available. It has an effect depending on the number of different grade units on board. If you have 2 or more grade 1s, you draw 2 and discard 1. If you have 2 or more grade 2s, you give a unit plus 10k. And if you have 2 or more grade 3s, you can countercharge 1. This means you are supposed to have 2 of each on board to get the maximum usage out of this card, but that can result in some wonky boards. Kyoka does have a resender, so she isn't locked to 3 attacks, but the deck isn't the strongest. Then moving on from magazines, we have Lofa, the Giant Crow. She cares about grade 2 or greater units, and for a single Soul Blast, she can give all of them boost. Then at the end of the battle, she attacks. If your back row has 2 or more grade 3 or greater units, you can Counterblast 1 to return a rearguard from both the front and back row, and then if you do, you can call a grade 3 to an open rearguard. The deck definitely needs a lot of help, but hey, you are able to use any grade 2s or grade 3s in Lyrical Monasterio. Then moving on from Lofa, we have Lutetia, the deck with the Cursed Place. Lutetia has 2 abilities. The first gives her plus 5k if you played a normal order. The second activates when she attacks a Vanguard. You can Counterblast 1 to gain effects based on the number of Cursed Play cards in Soul. For 2 or more, you draw a card and she gains plus 5, and then for 4 or more, you can discard a card to restand her and she'll lose a drive at the end of the battle she attacks. A very common restanding effect, but we should look at the Cursed Play cards first. There are 2 Cursed Plays currently available, with a new one being released as a promo in the near future. The first Cursed Play is a normal order that puts itself into Soul, then Soul Charges 1. Then you can call a card from Soul with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard and it gains plus 5k. Her second curse play is a blitz order that puts itself into soul and gives one of your units plus 15k, and then if your soul has 4 more curse plays, it will draw a card. Lutetia is quite a strong deck, and it has some very strong support units. So it could definitely do well, maybe with the added support from the latest Lyrical set and that new promo Cursed play. But let's move on to a deck that is in need of some real good support, Madel. She can Counterblast 2 to reveal the top card of your deck. Depending on the unit revealed, you get a different effect. If it's a normal unit, you put the revealed card into hand, then call a card from drop, and it gains a crit. If it's a trigger unit, you can countercharge 1, then call a card from drop. Madel does have access to a 4th attack in the form of Elise, who can restand for a Soul Blast when she's called from drop by your Vanguard's ability. And with the addition of Noelia in the latest set, you can now call 2 from drop instead of 1, so that the deck can do 5 attacks. The deck still needs some real way of getting more power to properly pressure, but let's just move on to the glitter deck for Lyrical Monasterio, Michu and her Cannonballs. Michu is able to Counterblast 1, draw a card, then either call a card or discard a card. Then her second ability is a Cannonball ability. It lets you Soul Blast 2 to retire an opponent's rearguard and give herself plus 5k. Not great, but that's where her Cannonball orders come into play. The only current option is Flower Cannonball. It draws your card when placed into Order Zone. If your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can put it into drop to change Michu's Cannonball abilities. The new ability lets you Soul Blast 2 to give 3 units plus 10k. This is good, but we have to look at one more unit before we move on. That is her supporting unit, Nokwo, who can swap her positions with Vanguard if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater. This means you get a 4th attack with an extra drive. The deck does need some real support, as almost every unit we've gotten cares about countercharging for some reason. So a unit that could give Nokwo extra drives or a new Cannonball order would help. But with that, let's move on to the Highlander deck, Pachalka. At the end of battle she attacked, you can Counterblast 1 to reveal the top 7 cards of your deck. If none of them have the same name, except for any Pachalkas you may find, you can choose one of them, call it to rear, and it gains plus 10k. However, if you choose Pachalka, you can write it on Van and it loses a drive. This means you can potentially do 4 Vanguard swings in one turn. Is that likely? No. But it is possible, and even at worst case, you still get a total of 4 attacks a turn if you have to call the rearguard. She even received a new promo that counts herself as Pachalka while in the deck. Lisette can gain plus 5k on rear if your Vanguard is Pachalka, and if she's on Vanguard Circle, she'll let you ride into the real Pachalka at the end of turn, so you can continue doing her effect next turn. This is quite a fun deck, as you have to play many 1-0s, and it's also pretty strong. Being able to put so much Vanguard pressure is insane. But let's now move on to the last 2 units, Charmant, Fennel, and Sienna. Starting with Charmant, who is surprisingly reminiscent of Dimensional Police with her power checks. Charmant can Counterblast 1 to choose 2 units with Leverage Sours from Soul and call them to rearguard, and then she gains plus 5k. I do not know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but for the rest of this, I'll just be saying it like that. Then when she attacks while not boosted, you can choose 3 more units with Leverage Sours in their different card names and match their powers to her. If her power is 33k or greater, your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can then Soul Blast 2 to give the unit in the back row center the ability to attack and perform drive checks. The biggest issue with this deck is the fact that there's only 4 units with Leverage Sours, and one of them is Charmant, and then another is the starter. Charmant also can only target grade 2 or lower Leverage Sours, so she can't target herself on Rearguard Circle. I do think the deck looks pretty fun, and with the addition of maybe 1 or 2 more units with Leverage Sours in the name, I think it'll be a bit more consistent. But hey, these are extra drive checks without having to discard cards. But following Charmant, we have Fennel, the girl with the triple tricks. She has 2 abilities. The first locks you into only playing the order Trick or Treat, but you can play 3 of them. Her second ability activates when she attacks. If you've played 3 or more orders, you can Counterblast 1 to choose a rearguard. The rearguard and Fennel both gain a crit, then your whole front row gains plus 2k for each copy of Trick or Treat in your drop. But now let's look at the Trick or Treat order. There are 2 separate arts, but they are the same card. Trick or Treat allows you to place 16 copies of it in your deck. It allows you to use 1 of the 3 effects depending on how many you've played that turn. The first time, you can return an opponent's rearguard to the bottom of the deck. If your opponent chooses not to return the unit, you can draw a card. The second time, you draw a card and countercharge. And the third time, you can call a grade 3 or less unit from your drop to rearguard. The deck is locked to 3 attacks currently, but I can see why with crit pressure and being able to give your front row plus 10k from just 5 orders and drop. A multi-attacker could be a real menace if it gets to keep that crit. But with that, let's move on to the final unit, Sienna. Sienna is a very interesting card design. She has 3 abilities. The first gives her a crit and an extra drive if your opponent's front row, rearguards, or guardian circle have 2 or less cards in it. This means if your opponent doesn't have any front row rearguards, they have to call at least 3 cards to remove the crit and the extra drive. Her second ability says that when she's attacked, you can put a trigger from hand into soul to give her plus 15k power. This means you can trade a draw trigger for some extra shield, but why would you want to use that ability instead of just using the trigger normally? Say in the case of a crit or a heal. That is because of her third ability. It states that at the end of the battle she was attacked by a rearguard. If no cards reported to Guardian Circle, your opponent has to discard a card from hand. If they don't, you get to bind a rearguard that just attacked. This means you get to remove your opponent's units during their turn, so they can't call units to get rid of Sion's extra crit and drive. The deck is most likely to playing quite a few Blitz orders, as those don't go into Guardian Circle when used. The deck doesn't have access to multi-attack, but somewhat understandably so. It is more of a pseudo-control deck that relies on wasting your opponent's card until Sion can get through and finish the job. But with that, we have officially reached the end of the list. Lyrical Monasterio, I think, has some of the most unique decks out there, but it is quite a lot. I hope this video is less than 20 minutes, but if not, thank you for watching. I am about to go to a sneak peek and probably pack out some crappy double rare. If I got anything wrong in this video, please let me know. Lyrical Monasterio is such a big nation, and although I do pride myself in how much I know about the game, Lyrical Monasterio has way too much in it. But with that, I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you all for watching.